Recently, we took a ride up to Vermont to get together with some college friends. So we headed up there and into this cute town called Manchester, Vermont. And as we're going through town, my husband suddenly stopped the car and pulled a U-turn. I had no idea why until he pointed out this sign. Who was the Manchester vampire? Her name was Rachel Harris Burton, and she lived in Manchester, Vermont. In 1790, at 21 years old and newly married to Revolutionary War Captain Isaac Burton, a deacon of the Congregational Church, she fell ill with consumption, better known as tuberculosis, and she passed away. Not wasting any time at all, the good captain remarried one Huldah Powell, but it wasn't long before she, too, fell ill with the same sickness. Now, this was a time in history in New England, in the United States, where two things were going on: a TB epidemic and a rampant vampire panic. TB wasn't discovered until 1882, and treatment only became available in the 1940s, but they believed it had been around for 150 million years. They offered cures such as drinking brown sugar dissolved in water and frequent horseback riding. As Huldah became ill, one of Burton's elderly aunts suggested that his former wife's evil spirit was draining his new wife's life from her. Rachel's final words had been along the lines of, "I'll be with you always," which led to convincing both of them that his now dead first wife had become a vampire. The opinion spread throughout the community that Rachel had returned from the dead to exact vengeance on her husband's new spouse. And so, in the winter of 1793, a procession of between 500 and 1,000 townsfolk walked to the Meads Mill Cemetery in town and, led by Timothy Mead, the town's magistrate, dug up Rachel. It's said to have been quite the sight, as her corpse after 2 years was not in great shape. Her heart, liver, and lungs were removed and ceremoniously burned to ashes in the local blacksmith's forge while the crowd watched. Two rumors began to circulate. First, that those present saw an apparition in the smoke rising from the forge as if her spirit was finally being freed to find peace and forgiveness. And second, that the ashes were mixed with water and given to Huldah to drink as some sort of desperate attempt at a cure. The vampire scare in Manchester was written about in Judge John S. Pettibone's 1860 manuscript, The Early History of Manchester, in which he said, and I quote, "Timothy Mead officiated at the altar in the sacrifice to the demon vampire, who it was believed was still sucking the blood of the then living wife of Captain Burton. It was the month of February, and good sleigh riding." Despite all of this, Huldah would pass away in September of that year. All this occurred 100 years after the Salem witch trials. However, in the years following, the vampire explanation was discounted. Instead, it was decided that witchcraft was the cause. Captain Burton went on to marry 2 more times, his third wife having 7 children before passing at the age of 33. More than 200 years later, a ceremony was held at the cemetery, now known as Factory Point Cemetery, where a marker was unveiled in memory of Rachel Harris Burton. It tells her story, as well as pointing visitors to her beautiful grave, a stone carved by Zerubbabel Collins, who was a member of a famous family of sculptors who signed their gravestones. Rachel Burton's story is one of the earliest vampire stories to come out of New England in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. But there are more. 2.5 hours southeast in the town of Jewett City, Connecticut, in 1854, the people of the town exhumed several of their dead that they suspected to be vampires. It was believed the corpses had been rising up and killing the townsfolk. There were even newspaper interviews with supposed survivors. Tales like this, of violated corpses with rib fractures, were found going back to the late 1700s as far west as Minnesota, but most were concentrated in New England. The one uniting factor that has been found among these vampire panics has been that they occurred during tuberculosis outbreaks. Some communities in Maine and Massachusetts chose to exhume and flip the corpse, while in Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Vermont, they would burn the heart and breathe in the smoke as a cure. This varied greatly from the European tradition of beheading the vampire, while others bound their feet with thorns. Manchester, Vermont is a beautiful little town nestled among the Green Mountains. It's the home of Hildene, the estate of Abraham Lincoln's son, Robert, the American Museum of Fly Fishing, and the Southern Vermont Arts Center, as well as hiking trails on Mount Equinox. It's also in close proximity to multiple ski resorts. It's the quintessential New England town. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.